Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. And I don't mean in a dream, I mean like in your actual waking life.
Yeah.
You're right there at the precipice.
That's a terrifying thought.
Right. The wind is just actively pulling at your clothes. The ground beneath your boots feels suddenly just terrifyingly unstable. And your breath gets all tight in your chest. Every single cell in your body is just screaming at you to step back.
Yeah, because it's this overwhelming, totally physical command. I mean, your body is doing absolutely everything in its power to keep you alive in that split second.
Exactly. It's a complete override switch. But what if that scream, that intense visceral surge of terror, isn't actually a warning to retreat? What if it's an invitation to lean in? Welcome to today's deep dive. Today we're taking on this mission to completely reframe how we look at fear.
It's such a necessary reframe, honestly.
It really is. We're going to synthesize decades of psychological research, specifically leaning into the principles of Gestalt theory, to understand what is actually happening in your brain and your body when you panic.
Because, we've all been taught to treat fear as a glitch.
Right, like it's a bug in the software.
Yeah.
We view it as this annoying relic of primitive survival wiring that we're supposed to just medicate away or suppress or somehow, life hack out of existence so we can be endlessly productive.
Which is just so unrealistic.
Completely. So today, we're going to explore fear as a signal, like a profoundly honest and arguably essential messenger.
I love that. And to really grasp that, we have to look at how human perception actually works. Because in psychology, and specifically within the Gestalt framework that I focus on, perception is never neutral.
I mean, what exactly?
Well, you aren't a camera. You're not just passively recording the world with objective detachment. Your perception is actively organized, and it's constantly shaped by what matters to you right in this exact moment.
Okay.
So from that view, fear isn't a pathology. It's not some broken part of your brain. It's actually a sudden, dramatic narrowing of attention that just forces reality into immediate, sharp focus.
Yeah, I want to break down that narrowing of attention. Because if we're going to say fear is a signal rather than a glitch, I think we need to understand the mechanics of it. Like, how does that physical and mental shift actually alter the way we perceive the world?
Right. So it comes down to a core concept we call figure-ground differentiation.
Figure ground, okay.
Yeah. In ordinary, relaxed moments, your perception is incredibly fluid. Think of listening to an orchestra. A really beautiful violin melody stands out. That becomes the figure, while the harmony just sort of fades into the background, which we call the ground.
Oh, I see.
And then seamlessly, your attention shifts, and suddenly the cello becomes the figure. Or, think about reading a book. The words are the figure, and the coffee cup on the table beside you simply fades from your awareness. It becomes the ground.
Right, so I'm not actively thinking about the coffee cup, but my brain knows it's there if I want to just reach out and grab it.
Exactly. The system is relaxed so things can shift in and out, but under a perceived threat, that entire perceptual field basically collapses.
The fluidity just vanishes.
Completely vanishes. The source of the danger becomes this luminous, rigid, undeniable figure, and absolutely everything else fades completely into the ground.
Wow. What is actually happening in the brain when that collapse occurs? Because, it feels so instantaneous.
It is instantaneous. It's an incredibly efficient cascade. Basically, your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, effectively hijacks your prefrontal cortex.
And the prefrontal cortex is the logic center, right?
Right, the slow, logical, analytical part of your brain. The amygdala just overrides it and dumps adrenaline and cortisol into your system.
Oh.
Physically, your pupils dilate so you can take in more light.
Jeez.
Yeah, and blood flow is actively restricted from your peripheral vision so you can hyper-focus on whatever is directly in front of you. So tunnel vision isn't just a metaphor, it is a physiological reality.
That's wild. People always say time feels like it's slowing down too.
Oh, absolutely. And this isn't your brain distorting reality, it's your brain meticulously selecting reality. The organism is prioritizing exactly what it deems essential to keep you alive, and just muting everything else.
That makes me think of an aggressive pop-up blocker on a web browser.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like, sometimes it's incredibly useful for stopping malicious code, but sometimes it completely blacks out the screen and blocks the content you actually need to see because it's prioritizing security over functionality.
That's a great way to put it, actually. It's a mechanism of extreme selection. Fear is basically the fastest path to awareness. It completely bypasses that clunky analytical mind to orient you towards something crucial.
I can really see how that selection plays out in everyday life, even when there isn't a physical threat. Like, think about walking into a dinner party or, a staff meeting.
Oh, yes, the dreaded staff meeting.
Right, you step into the room and you just feel this immediate, heavy unease, but you have no idea why. Like, your conscious thought hasn't analyzed the room yet.
But your perception has.
Yes. Your perception has already highlighted some subtle tension. Maybe it's a specific tight tone in someone's voice, or the fact that a usually friendly colleague is, like, actively avoiding eye contact.
Exactly.
The fear sharpens reality before you even have words for it.
Yeah.
Basically saying, this matters, pay attention.
Right, your system caught the anomaly way before your logic could. But, this brings us to the real complication of modern life.
Look at this.
Well, if this intense figure ground prioritization evolved to keep us physically alive, like from a tiger, why does it hijack our nervous systems in modern, completely non-lethal situations?
Right, because my boss sending a Slack message that says, we need to talk, is not a life or death situation.
Definitely not.
Yet my heart rate spikes, my pupils dilate, and I get that exact same tunnel vision. Why?
It happens because human survival isn't just about avoiding physical death. Psychologically speaking, survival is also about protecting the integrity of the self.
The integrity of the self, what does that mean?
It means your boundaries, your deeply held values, your unspoken truths, the identity you've built over years. Often the greatest threat you face on a random Tuesday afternoon isn't to your physical body. It's the quiet, creeping erosion of your own authenticity.
Oh, wow. Let me see if I can ground that in an example, because I think I've observed this dynamic in people I talk to.
Yeah.
Like, take the creative process.
Okay, sure.
I know this artist who, she freezes every single time she's about to share her work. She has an incredible portfolio, but the moment it's time to hit publish or email a gallery owner,
Yeah.
she just panics.
And what does she say the fear is?
Well, on the surface, she tells herself she's terrified of criticism. She says she fears someone telling her the work is terrible.
Right, but that surface fear is usually just a smokescreen for something much more profound.
Exactly, because when we really dug into it, she didn't fear the criticism at all. She actually feared being truly seen.
Oh, yes. That's a huge one.
Because if her art resonates, if people love it and are moved by it, she can no longer hide behind the comfortable excuse that it's just a hobby. She has to step up and claim the identity of a working creator.
Which is a massive shift.
It is. Her fear isn't about rejection at all. It's about the terrifying responsibility of stepping into her actual power and completely changing how she sees herself.
What's fascinating here is that fear so often illuminates the edges of our unfinished business. It shows us exactly where we stopped growing.
Yeah.
Your artist friend isn't fearing a negative future. She's fearing the expansion of her own identity. The old map of herself just doesn't fit the new terrain she's entering.
And letting go of that old map feels scary.
It feels like a kind of death to the psyche, so the organism panics to keep the old self alive.
I see the exact same thing in relationships. Think about the intimacy evader.
We all know one.
Right? The person who constantly pulls away just as a connection gets deep and vulnerable. It's so easy to label them as cold or emotionally unavailable. But I wonder if they aren't avoiding closeness because they dislike connection.
Right. Why do you think they avoid it?
They might be avoiding it because intimacy threatens to dissolve this carefully constructed, highly defensive persona they've worn for decades.
Absolutely. To let someone truly in for means the armor has to come off.
Yeah.
And if you've worn that armor your entire life to protect yourself from getting hurt, taking it off feels incredibly dangerous. The organism reacts with literal terror to protect the known structure of who you are, even if that structure is keeping you desperately lonely.
Wow. Okay, but that brings up a massive question for me. If fear is trying to protect our identity in the present moment,
Yeah.
why does the reaction so often feel wildly disproportionate to the actual event?
What do you mean?
Like, why does a mild disagreement with a partner make someone feel like the world is literally ending?
Because the perceived threat isn't actually coming from the present moment, it's coming from the past.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In Gestalt psychology, we talk about the concept of an incomplete Gestalt. Think of how a melody feels just agonizingly unresolved if the pianist stops right before the final chord. Or a sentence that hangs in the air without a...
I see what you did there. You desperately want it to finish.
Exactly. Human emotional experiences function the exact same way. They strive for closure, they want to be fully processed and integrated.
Right.
But when an emotional experience is interrupted, maybe by trauma or deep shame, or simply because we were too young to have the tools to process it, It remains unfinished. It just lingers in the background of your psyche. It becomes a kind of phantom limb.
A phantom limb. Hold on, let me push back on this a little bit.
Please do.
Are you saying that when someone completely freezes or just explodes during a minor conflict today, they aren't actually reacting to the current argument at all? Because, I mean, sometimes if my partner and I are fighting over who forgot to run the dishwasher, it's not some deep phantom limb from childhood.
No, of course not.
Sometimes I'm just exhausted and really annoyed about dirty dishes.
And that is a very fair distinction. A dirty dish can absolutely just be a dirty dish. But here's where it gets really interesting. The tell is in the intensity of the physiological reaction.
The intensity.
Right. If you are mildly annoyed, you are reacting to the dishwasher. But if your heart is pounding, your throat is tight, and you feel this overwhelming urge to flee the house or scream over a ceramic plate, the field has collapsed.
Oh, I see.
At that point, the current argument is just a trigger. You are reacting to an old, unresolved rupture.
Okay, give me an example of how that mapping actually works, because that's fascinating.
Okay, imagine a child who learned early on that expressing anger meant their parents would withdraw love and give them the silent treatment.
Okay,
Yeah.
that creates an incomplete gestalt. The child couldn't process the terror of that abandonment. Fast forward decades later, a partner raises their voice over those dirty dishes. The environment hasn't actually changed, the partner isn't leaving.
But the body thinks they are.
Yes, the threat of abandonment tied to anger, simply repeated itself. The brain says, danger, we are about to be abandoned, and it dumps the adrenaline.
So the body is just playing out a script from 20 years ago.
Exactly, because the organism always seeks wholeness. It will keep presenting this terrifying figure to you again and again in different relationships until it is finally met with awareness.
Wow.
The goal here isn't to logic your way out of it in the heat of the moment. The goal is insight.
But how are you defining insight here? Because I feel like I can intellectually know, oh, I have abandonment issues, but still completely lose my mind during an argument.
Right, because intellectual knowledge is just data. Insight is a sudden, profound reorganization of the perceptual field.
It is the moment previously disconnected elements click into a coherent whole. It's that visceral, full-body realization that your crippling financial anxiety isn't actually about your current bank balance, which might be totally fine, but rather it's your father's dread of scarcity that you absorbed at age 6.
Oh man, that distinction is incredibly important because having that true insight doesn't magically erase the fear, does it? Like you don't suddenly become a Zen master.
Not at all.
But it stops the fear from hijacking the entire dashboard. It makes the fear one part of your story instead of the whole picture. You can look at the anxiety and say, this isn't a current threat. This is my dad's old worry paying a visit.
Exactly. You've contextualized the figure against a broader ground. But of course, seeing the pattern is really only half the battle.
That is exactly where I wanted to go next. Because once we have this insight, once we recognize that this intense fear is an echo of the past, how do we actually move forward?
That's the hard part.
It is. I know so many people, and honestly, myself included at times, who fall into the trap of endless self-analysis. Like, we spend years in therapy or journaling about why we are afraid. We map out all our childhood traumas.
And nothing changes.
Yes. Our day-to-day lives never actually change. We just become very, very articulate about our paralysis.
Right. To break that paralysis, we have to look at the concept of isomorphism.
Okay, you're going to have to translate isomorphism for me. Because that sounds like something I'd fail a geometry test on.
I promise it's simpler than it sounds. Isomorphism is the foundational idea that there is a structural correspondence between your inner experience and your outer expression.
Meaning they match.
Yes, they mirror and shape each other. When you are consumed by an old fear, you don't just feel it in your mind. Notice what your physical body does. Your posture collapses. Your shoulders hunch to protect your heart.
Your breathing gets weird.
Exactly. Your breathing becomes shallow, your voice tightens, your physical presence becomes a living, breathing diagram of your inner restricted state.
So my physical body literally takes the exact shape of my psychological fear.
Yes, but the critical part of isomorphism is that it works both ways.
Wait, really?
Yes. Just as your inner state shapes your outer form, engaging the outer world differently can actively restructure your inner field. This is why the Gestalt approach heavily emphasizes experimentation in the present moment over just endless interpretation of the past.
Let me make sure I'm grasping this. So instead of sitting alone in my room journaling for the 100th time about why am I so afraid to speak up in meetings, the real work is an experiment.
Right.
The work is asking, what happens if I physically sit up straight, plant my feet firmly on the floor, take a deep breath, and force myself to speak, even when my voice is literally shaking.
Exactly. You act while trembling. Action in the present is what completes the gestalt that was left hanging in the past.
Wow.
You don't wait for the fear to leave before you move. You move to show the fear that the environment has changed. And this brings us to the boundary of contact, because growth fundamentally happens at the boundary between the self and the other.
The boundary of contact, meaning the space where I actually interact with the world rather than just sitting around thinking about it.
Precisely. And fear spikes at this boundary because true contact requires an immense, terrifying risk. You must allow another person or a new experience to affect you.
Yeah.
And you must take the risk of allowing yourself to affect them. You cannot control the outcome. Most people retreat from contact not because they don't want love or success or connection, but because they fear the unpredictable transformation that real contact demands.
Man, stepping into that boundary really forces us to accept that fear is just going to be along for the ride. It's not going away.
No, it's not.
And that completely flips the script on what our ultimate goal should be when dealing with anxiety. I mean, we live in an era that is utterly obsessed with control.
Oh, completely.
We try to biohack our sleep. We track our heart rate variability on our watches. We force ourselves into these rigid mindfulness routines like they are corporate appointments. We treat anxiety as this intruder that just must be expelled at all costs so we can achieve this state of permanent frictionless calm.
Which is impossible. We pathologize the very thing that proves we are alive. Philosophers have long seen this differently. Søren Kierkegaard, the 19th century philosopher, famously described anxiety as the dizziness of freedom.
The dizziness of freedom. That's a wild way to think about it.
Isn't it? He argued that you don't tremble at the threshold of a big decision or a new relationship because you are broken or because your brain is glitching.
Right.
You tremble because you are awake. You are standing at the edge of possibility, looking down into the vastness of your own potential, and you realize you are free to choose.
Wow.
You are free to become something new, and yes, you are entirely free to fail. To live an authentic life absolutely requires that vulnerability.
It's just so countercultural to view it that way because, fear is brutally honest. Like, you can fake joy, you can perform sadness or empathy to fit into a group, but raw fear, it bypasses the ego completely. It bypasses all our clever little social masks and tells you exactly where your boundaries are, what you actually care about, and where your wounds still hurt.
It's a compass.
It really is. And the terrible paradox of our modern culture of control is that by burying fear, by suppressing it and trying to optimize it away, we actually make it fester. We push it down into the dark, where it just distorts our reality from the underground. But turning toward it, looking at it and acknowledging it, that seems to soften it into, like, a whisper of our unclaimed potential.
Which is why the ultimate goal in all of this is integration, not transcendence. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you aren't trying to achieve some enlightened, detached state where you never feel fear again.
Right.
You are trying to bring the exiled, shamed, terrified fragments of yourself back into the whole. You treat the fear as a messenger. The poet Rilke suggested that perhaps all the dragons in our lives are really just princesses waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage.
That is, yeah. Wow. So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? If we tie all of these threads together, it means that your fear doesn't just point to what you might lose in the future.
No, it's much deeper than that.
It points to what you have already lost in the past.
Yeah.
The times you stayed quiet, the boundaries you let get crossed, the moments you abandoned yourself. And it points to what you are actively being invited to reclaim right now.
It is showing you the exact location of your next phase of growth.
It really is. It makes me think of fear not as a monster hiding in the closet trying to destroy you.
No, it has a shape, but it's much more familiar than a monster.
It's a silhouette.
Exactly.
It is your silhouette. The next time that wave of fear rises up in you, before a hard conversation, a creative risk, or a leap of faith, don't ask how to escape it. Don't look for the exit.
Just stay with it.
Imagine that the fear is the exact outline of who you could be if you stopped apologizing for your depth. If you allowed yourself to want and to risk and even to fail, ask yourself, what part of me is trying to be born right now?
That's the question.
And then don't rush to fill the space with a frantic analytical answer. Just listen to the silence that follows the question. Let the dizziness of freedom hover for a moment. Because the great teacher you've been searching for was never outside of you. It was always the part of you that remembered you were meant to grow.